right, with 3 lines up from the bottom. Oh yeah, good, thank you, Peretz. Anyway, so the Gemara's kasha, 3 lines up from the bottom, or 4, whatever it is, says that what about an ant? So an ant is missing a limb. Is that considered a beria? So now what it means, what the Gemara means by that is that there's 2 points for a beria. Even though an ant is smaller than a kazayas, so normally the isser that you get for malchus, for eating something treif, has to be a minimum of a kazayas. But the Gemara Makkah says that if you eat an ant, if you eat a full bug, then you are over on, you're over on an isser and you get malchus, even though it's way less than a kazayas, because it's a beria, right? So the question is what happens if the ant is missing a leg, right? Now it's alive and it can function perfectly fine without the leg. So
you tell that to the ant.
Good, but it's you get true. You know what? The ants are hard working.
Depends what the uncle says, better than the ants.
But the ants are probably hard working. So what the Gemara is asking about an amala, but it's with any beria that it's missing a limb. So is that considered whole? In which case, if you eat the ant, you're going to be chayiv malchus, or do we say that it's not whole? Bottom line, it's missing a leg. So what the Gemara is going to be totally in is it's alive. So it's the beria pshat that it's alive, or is the beria pshat that it has to be complete, right? So the Gemara wants to bring a raya from our Gemara. That's the Gemara of Ramad Aleph. And the Gemara says you can't bring a raya, right? And then it says, what does it say? It doesn't say teku. It just says it's going to be a shaila. It's a shaila that the Gemara ends up saying that it's like tzarachian. The Gemara just says tiboy. It's a question, right? So okay. So now the practical. Again, I'm just doing the practical before we actually do the Gemara because I'm just finishing driving up over here. So the practical is like this. As everybody knows, we have the bug issue. So how come the bug issue is an issue if they're bottled, right? You have a cauliflower or lettuce and a bug. You have a bug in it. So what's the problem? There's 60 times more cauliflower or broccoli than the bug. So why is it not bottled? So the reason that it's not bottled is because it's a beria, and a beria is not bottled. The same way here, that if it's a beria, Yechayim Malchus, even though it's less than a kazayas, so therefore the halacha is very clear that a beria is never going to be bottled either, but it's a derabanan. That's the main point, is it's a derabanan. So what does this have to do? It's a very interesting thing that where the whole sugya of whether you have to check your lettuce and vegetables for bugs, of the last Masechta you'd think you'd find the sugya would be in Nazir, right? But it's in Nazir. So since the Gemara says tzarachian, so Mamela, if it's a derabanan, so on any shaila that comes up, whether a bug is complete or not, is going to be a suffix derabanan lekula, right? So therefore, when you see all these different kashrus agencies having all these different opinions about whether you're allowed to eat things with bugs, frozen is okay, or if it's cooked, it's okay, or pre-washed, it's okay. So basically what a lot of them are hanging their hat on is that when you power wash the vegetables, they're assuming you're going to knock off a leg from the bugs, right? Or if you're going to cook them or triple wash them or whatever it is, you're gonna probably knock off a leg. So since you're gonna knock off a leg, so it's a tzarachian from our Gemara. Gemara doesn't paskin it, and since the whole concept of something being bottled is a beria not being bottled is a derabanan, so therefore suffix derabanan lekula, right? So mamela, anytime you have these shilas of whether the bug is complete, then a lot of kashrut agencies are makel, right? Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Yeah. So then you have, if somebody like New York City water that has to be filtered, right? So what happens if somebody didn't filter the water and they cook a soup with the water, with the unfiltered water? Can you rock them? That's not an issue for you, right? But can you eat the soup? So Shaila is does the what?
Five
Does
o'clock.
the
We gave a shear on this years ago when it started up. I was there, and it said once you cook it up, that berry is no longer berry. Berry.
right, exactly. Yeah,
So then you could eat the soup. So,
that's for
yeah.
this reason. That's for this reason because once it gets cooked, so we're going to assume that it knocks off at least one limb, and since it knocks off one limb, so therefore it's going to be it's no longer a peria, and mamela it's going to be bottom, right? Even though lemais it's a tzarachi in our Gemara. The Gemara doesn't paskin it, right? It could be it's still considered a berry even if it's missing a limb, right? If it's missing a limb, it's still considered a berry. Then all these coolers are out the window, right? So, but anyway, so that's the first practical thing. The other practical thing from this first Gemara is when the Shulchan Aruch has a machlokes whether you have to make a bar nefashos on one grape. We've had this one before, right? Meaning because it's a berry. So if you eat one grape, Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah says don't eat one grape because since it's a berry, and I'm just saying a grape, I'm just saying because it's usually very small. If you have an orange or an apple, that's usually a kazayas anyway, so you're going to for sure make a bar nefashos. But on a grape, if you eat one grape, then that's a berry, and it could be that it has chashivas to it. That's the whole point of this Gemara, that a berry has chashivas to it. And since it has chashivas to it, maybe you have to make a bracha achrayna, even if you don't have a kazayas. But the Mishnah Berurah says on that if you take out the pit, then it's no longer a berry. Take out the seed, even if it's not edible. You take out the seed, so it's no longer a berry.
I can't.
So, yeah.
By the grape, just pulling out the whatever that's called, what it's attached to, that already
stem.
makes it missing part of it. No,
does it always pull out some of the flesh?
Pull out a mashu. All you need is the mashu.
Yeah,
the ukits, and that's it.
No, I'm saying, but not always when you pull out the stem does it come out, right? Does it take some of the flesh? You're saying theoretically, if you pull out some of it and it takes some of the flesh, then it's no longer a sholem. It's no longer a sholem. Yeah, 100%. That's what I would think. No.
Yeah.
You could also cut it up into pieces. The Mishnah Berurah says you can cut it up into pieces, and that would also be.
Doesn't cooking mess up, bug parts, or that doesn't really work anymore?
Yes, that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. That the cooking, when you cook it probably knocks off at least one of the limbs, and therefore it's no longer a berry. That's exactly what the Paiskim are saying, right? The Shah, it's a machlokes really, the Shach and the Magen Avram, whether if it shrivels up, is that considered like it's no longer a berry, right? Because when they die, they shrivel up. So the question is that considered beria or not? But it seems like we'd be mekel because this whole thing is din d'Rabbanan. That's the real. I'm surprised nobody was screaming and yelling about it. But meaning this whole tumult that they're making you crazy, five lavim for eating a bug and all that. That's all if you eat a bug straight up. Not when you eat a bug. Not when you eat a bug that's in a mixture. When you eat a bug that's in a mixture, then it's a d'Rabbanan. Right? It's a d'Rabbanan at the most. It's a d'Rabbanan. Right? And even then, if it shrivels up, if it breaks, then right? So everybody that says they're making everybody crazy. Right?
So why is this all considered like a suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula? Are these considered vadais at that point? Like if you know for sure. I'm saying like the whole strawberry controversy, is that a vadai?
Oh, so that's really dependent on what the infestation rates are. If it's a 50% infestation rate, then that's called a vada. And then that would mamash be an isser. Then we look at it like an isser. But if it's less than a 50%, then it's a d'Rabbanan. I remember Rav Faiva Cohen's being asked about this. About if you drink the New York City water, you ever in a d'Rabbanan or you ever in a d'Oraisa? and he said it's a derabbanan. He said it's a derabbanan.
I'm good.
Right? So that's I'm saying. So, but the broccoli, they claim that the broccoli is so infested that it's a deraisa. Okay, I don't know. Whichever way you go with it.
That calzone sure tasted good.
Yeah. Well, that's your extra protein.
Right?
That's extra protein, right? Anyways, okay. So with that, let's start reading the Gemara. On the bottom of Nun Beis Amud Beis. Yeah. Nun Aleph Amud Beis. Yeah. 3 lines up. So Ba'ira Namala Shechas Ramahu, an ant that's missing a leg or something or anything like that. I don't know if it has hands, legs, whatever they're called, but it's missing something. Yeah. So Mao Shiura Gemirin La. Did we learn it out? The Shiurim is Gemirin La means it's Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, right? V'hachaser, and it's missing. Meaning we said that it has to be a complete bug, and it's missing. A beria Gemirin La, or does it have to be a beria? Right? I mean, we call it beria. Yeshivish jargon, it's beria, but I think the real pronunciation, the way Art School had it, is biria, right? I know when the YU Rabbanim say shir, they call it a biria. They try and be more medactic than we do. I got it's a biria. I don't know. I'm going with the yeshivish jargon.
They got to be medactic in something. So
okay. Yeah, I just came from a YU wedding with all the YUs, all of them mamish. Yeah. But anyway, so I bury a gemirula, or is it a beria va'ika? And it's considered a beria because it's alive, right? The ant's alive, even though it's missing a leg, but it's alive. So that's the shaila. So on Tamar Aleph. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda diskarta. So Rabbi Yehuda said Tashema Bahem. It says by the Shemaina Shratzim, it says Bahem, right? That you have to have them in when they're how do you say it? Bahem means in them, with them, right? By Shratzim, that's the Shemaina Shratzim. Now Shemaina Shratzim, contrary to popular belief, are not mosquitoes and bugs and ants. They're much, much bigger, right? Weasels and I don't know what the other ones.
I did it
bigger.
once for the morning shirts. Yeah, I have a sheet someplace. I wrote them all down. I don't know where it is.
Oh, the English. I remember that, Taka. Yeah, I remember you showed it. Yeah, so Bahem, it says Yachul Bekulan. So you would think that you have to touch all of them, meaning you only become tummy if you touch a sheretz. If you have to touch the entire sheretz, meaning the sheretz has to be complete. Mayhem says from them. You don't have to touch the whole sheretz. You have to just touch part of the sheretz. Mayhem yachal miktasan. So you would think, okay, only if you touch even the smallest amount of the sheretz. It says bahem. So we're going in circles. It says bahem that you have to touch them totally. Mayhem sounds like you don't have to touch them totally. Haketzad ad sheyigav miktasan shukakulan. Right, until you touch part of it, which is the whole thing. Chacham said that's the size of a lentil, meaning once you touch a lentil size of the sheretz, then that's enough to be metama. If you touch less than it, then not. So basically, you have a sheretz that's roadkill, right? You have a sheretz that's roadkill, right? And you touched a little bit of it that's less than a bean, you're not going to become tummy. You're only going to become tummy once you touch a bean size of it, right? Why? So where did the Chachamim get that measurement from? Shekain hachaymet. I don't know what an English word for chaymet is. It's one of the shratzim. Shekain hachaymet tchilas b'riyase b'kadasha. When it's born, the beginning of its creation is the size of a adasha. So that's the smallest one. So memela, anything less than an adasha is as if it's not alive, right? Meaning we're looking at, in order for you to become tamei from a sheretz, you have to touch at least the amount that would possibly be alive. So what is that? That would be the amount of adasha. Shmamina shiura gemirila. So we see that is a complete shear, meaning that not complete gemirila here, meaning that it's we learn out that it's you need to have a adasha. If it's less than a adasha, you're not tummy. So the same thing with an ant, right? If the ant is missing a body part, even though it's alive, it does not have that shear, right? So that's what he wants to prove, that if an ant is missing that shear, it's not a berya. So the Gemara says, no, it's not true. Amar Rav Shmaya, ki ba'in shiura the b'deloy havi kadosh loy metame, right? When we're saying that you need a shear, that if there's no lentil size of flesh from this sheretz and it's not metama, the loy nafla neshama. That's because anything less than a lentil cannot have a neshama in it. Meaning, the smallest size a sheretz possibly is an adasha. So if it's not the size of adasha, it couldn't possibly be alive. Couldn't have had a neshama. So memela, anything less than adasha doesn't become tamei. Aval nafla neshama. But if you have something that has a neshama on it, meaning like an ant, even though it's missing a leg, that is not gonna be. It's not gonna lose its berya status, and maybe it's still considered a berry, even though it's missing a leg. The Gemara says, "Tibayilach." It's a question, right? So again, just what we said before, that's the shaila. So we don't. The Gemara says tibaylach. It's a shaila. So we don't know if an ant that's missing a leg is considered a berry or not. So memela, we paskin lakula because it's a suffix derabanan, right? Whether an ant is bottle or not, a whole ant is a derabanan. So if it's missing a limb, even though it's alive, we're going to call it that it would become bottle b'shishim, right? So that's why again, with all the bugs and the bug checking, if there's a chashash that it's missing a limb, so we say it's a berry and it's not bottle. That's why the old days, I think the kashrus agency already changed it. But the old days, they said that as long as you freeze the vegetables, then you could eat it, because the assumption is that when you freeze things, it expands, right? So if you have a bug in the vegetable and it gets frozen, so it blows up, and then memela, it loses its berry status, right? Which is what the Gemara is saying is it's tzarich. But I think the bug people already dialed that one back and said that doesn't fly. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get involved in the
the frozen chopped vegetables.
Yeah, right. Right. So that's and that same thing with making smoothies. That's another one, Taka. Smoothies, right? So people say, ask, can I take strawberries and raspberries and make a smoothie, right? So the bottom line is if you make it, depending on how thick the smoothie is, but if you make it pureed, then even if there are bugs in there, they get chopped up, and then memela they become bottle, right? Now the question is, can you do that lechatchila? That's a different sugya, right? But the bottom line is if it was already done, so it's already done, then for sure you could eat it, right? As long as it's pureed, because it gets chopped up, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's practical sugya number one. Fine. Now we continue in our anatomy, right? So the Gemara, again, the Mishnah that we're going on, and this is going to carry us for another bunch of blat. But the Mishnah that we're going on is all the things that a Nazir becomes tamei to, and then he'll have to take the haircut. And he's going to have to become, he's going to become tamei, and then he's tamei mace. He's going to have to wait the 7 days, sprinkle the Efer Parah, 3rd and the 7th, etc., etc. Right? Then he has to go back to keeping his Nazirus. So one of the things we said is the Shedra and the Gulgailas. If the Nazir becomes tamei to the spine and the skull, if he becomes tamei to the spine and the skull, then that's tumah. So the Gemara is asking, Ibayalahu, Shedra v'Gulgailas Tanan, does it mean them together? Meaning he has to touch the spine and the skull at the same time, meaning that they have to be connected to each other, or I don't know necessarily connected to each other, or he has to touch both of them. Or it means no, we look at the skull and the spine as two different entities, right? Basically, the question is it and or? A lot of times the vav, we don't know whether the vav is an or it's an and. If it's and, so then in order for this nazir to become tamei, or anybody to become tamei, but we're talking about nazir, so we'll say it as nazir, is if he has to touch the spine and the skull, right? Or do we say no, it's one or the other? So that's the shaila. So the Gemara is going to try and prove it a few times. So Amar Rava, Tashema, Shedra, Shegirid, Raiv, Eloy, and Shaba. If you have a Shedra, like the spine, and the Eloyin is like the stuff that comes out of the spine.
I think you mean.
I guess it's.
When you say Shedra, you really mean the backbone, right? You got the.
Well, I don't know.
The spine. The spine is the Chutta Shedra, isn't it?
No, that's the spinal cord.
No.
Isn't that the spine? The Chutta Shedra is the spinal cord. Yeah, that goes inside the spine.
Yeah, that's right. Otherwise,
what was the word you wanted to say? What was the word you wanted to say? The
backbone.
The backbone. I don't know. What is the backbone?
That's the spine.
The spine.
The backbone spine is the same thing, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. I get lost in translation. Okay.
Jacob, I posted skeleton pictures.
Yeah, right. Yes, thank you. Good.
Except for C1 and C2 and T down would not be called the backbone. That would just be the spine.
Okay, Gershon, we're going to trust you on that.
Where's the doctor?
With zebra, they probably mean you're touching the bones of the vertebrae, the bones around the spine. I assume we don't mean you're touching the actual spinal cord. That would be something peculiar. Besides which, it would have been,
it would have emulsified. Yeah,
it would be gone.
Maybe that's what that was yesterday's. That will become rekev. But anyways, okay. So Shedra Shagirid Raivi Lion Shabbat. If the backbone or the spine, there you go, right? The backbone or the spine loses the things that stick out of it. I know that's not things that stick out of it is not a medical term. I'm sorry.
The ribs.
The ribs, but it's not the regular ribs.
Assume you mean 1 second. You mean that what? How do you say that? What's the Hebrew word? Is it the nerves that are coming out of it, or is it the?
No. It's actual bones. It's actual bones. I think. Right. The Mephirish calls it slice, which means ribs.
Right.
Okay, so meaning from the backbone, now you got me on the backbone, from the spine, there's things that come out of it, right?
Yeah, the ribs, yeah.
If those are all broken, right? So Shedra, Shagirid, Raivi, Lion Shaba, most of those things are broken to Hira. So it's tar because it's not considered a proper spine. But in the kaver, afilu mishuberes amifreges. But once it's in the kaver, once it gets broken up and separated in the vertebrae, that's the word, right? Once it gets broken up in the kaver, it's all combined because since it's all in the same how do you say it? It's in the same spot. So memela, it's considered mukaf. It's considered like all in the same area, in a constricted area. So memela, that's considered tummy. So again, if you have a spine that has the ribs from the spine are broken, so if it's outside on the ground, it's not going to become tummy anymore because it's not substantial enough to make anything tummy. But when it's in the caver, or when it's in, I'm assuming it means also when it's in the coffin, then it's since it's in one area and it's enveloped by something, mamela, it's going to make it tummy. Right? So when it says time mashum the girid, the reason is because the ribs were broken, haloi girid. But if the ribs are not broken, so then tummy, the spine is tummy. It doesn't say anything about the skull. Right? The Gemara is just handling about the spine, whether it has broken ribs off the spine or not. That's mashma that if everything is complete, it's metame. What happened to the skull? Right? Shmamina, Shedra, Katani. We hear from this that it means either the backbone or the spine or the skull. And doesn't have to be both in order to make pimatama. So when it says not a proof, haloi katani. It doesn't say this that if it's not cut, then it's going to be matama. Hakamash milan dichigirid tahiru. All it's telling you is that if it's missing its ribs that come out of it, it's tar. Idach tibaylach, right? But the other shaila is you still have a shaila, meaning we're saying we wanted to say that you see that it's just handling ribs, and it's mashma that if the not ribs, it's the Gemara's handling with spine, right? It's mashma that if the spine is complete, it's matama having nothing to do with the skulls. The Gemara says no. The Gemara is discussing what the story is with the spine, right? Now, once you have a spine that's complete, the question is now, does it also need the skull? But you first have to figure out what's going on with the spine. Meaning we wanted to be medayik that you're only talking about spine. Why are you mentioning skull? Must be you don't need the skull to be tummy. You want to say no. We just got to figure out the basics of the spine. Now you have to figure out whether you're going to also need it to be together with the skull. So it's not a raya. Fine.
Yaakov,
yeah.
The doctors agree. You're talking about the vertebrae or the ribs? They're two totally different things.
No. Ribs. The Mefarish says the rib, not the ribs, the standard ribs. We're talking about the ribs that are coming off of the spine. The spine, there's a spine, and then there's bones that go perpendicular to the spine.
That's the vertebrae, no?
I'm not so sure if that's the vertebrae.
The ribs come out. The ribs come out of the vertebrae. Besides for the ribs, there's spinal bits that stick out of the vertebrae, not the ribs themselves, not the bones that come out. Part of the vertebrae itself is called a spinal process.
So
I had a few of mine shaved. That's how I know about it.
I know. You're talking about, but here we're talking about vertebrae or not vertebrae?
It's part of the vertebrae, the bits that stick out at the back of the vertebrae.
Because the surgery I had was on a vertebrae.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
Okay, so but I don't know if the vertebrae. Yeah.
Feel like whatever it is. Special thank you to Hashem. When I had my surgery on my thing, that's the surgery I woke up in the middle. When the scalpel went into my back. And the Abishta got me through it. So thank you, Hashem.
Why didn't they knock you back out?
They did, but that was after a process.
Wow. Okay. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Fine. So Toshima, next raya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shisha Dvarim, Rabbi Kiva Matama V'cham Matara. The Gemara is going to go through at the bottom of it. There's 6 things that Rabbi Kiva was Matama, and the Chachamim were Matar. V'chazav Rabbi Kiva, and Rabbi Kiva changed his mind and agreed with the Chachamim. Gomaisa Shaviyu Kupa Malaya Atzamas, the Beis HaKnesses Shel Tarsim. They brought a box of bones to the Beis HaKnesses, the Tarsim Beis HaKnesses. Right, what's Tarsim? The smiths, the metal workers. Right, remember we said that every shul had their own. This is our raya against those that say we shouldn't have many shuls. Right, the Gemara says that every job description, whatever, every guild, every guild had their own shul. Right?
Yeah, but see, that's probably shot because of their zmanim. That each one had their own zmanim. I don't know. It's more of
could be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, because you decided that your show can only handle such a rub, therefore I should have another show.
All right, fair enough.
I thought it was because so many people had Titus and the other guy that they just couldn't daven together.
No, they also they had multiple.
They were all in
competition. Had one rub. They only had one rub for all the shows.
Oh.
You saying that for a fact, or you just saying that?
I don't know. In recent history, yes. In the 200 whatever 150 years, they had one rub.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Here. So that's like Rabbi Feiner bouncing around the white shul to all the different minyanim, you're saying.
I was gonna say about you, it's with all the shilas, all the neighborhood with all the shuls. Okay, fine.
Okay. All right.
The difference was back then they had to have all the shuls band together and pay one salary. Here they band together, they pay no salary.
Very good.
Rebbe are not like this. There's a million different Satmar shuls, but they all go run to Rebbe as the Rebbe.
No, Parrots, there's a difference. Parrots, the shuls, they could all be Satmar shul, whatever, but there's a Moritz Tzedek in each shul. They don't have shuls. They don't have a shul without a Moritz Tzedek. There's no such thing.
Nish Moritz Tzedek, Marah, they call it, no?
whatever they
have
call
no
it.
Merit Tzedek. They have different names. Yeah, Dayan, right? Merit Tzedek. Yeah. Okay,
today,
whatever.
Most of them say Dayan today.
Yeah. So.
Such Bakiyasi and Rebbe's with this year. I know, wonderful.
Rabaran, you want to add
nobody looks too chassidish now, Chevra. I don't know. Very nice.
I want to add that to after my name, another initials. You can add it to JD, MD, PhD.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
A mutz. He's a mutz. You ever heard him say?
Might as well add AD also.
Yeah. And in our circles, he's called my posek. My posek said this. That's what they call him in our my posek. Right? Anyways, so Maisa.
By the way, it's not a joke. Peretz and I were at a chasna once, and I had a few drinks, and I introduced Peretz as Rabbi Stein. Peretz, you remember this, Maisa? The guy walked over, he wanted to talk to Rabbi Stein, ask him some shilas, and Peretz was going at it a little bit.
Could be I had a couple of drinks.
Peretz said, ask me anything you want about beef jerky or cookies. I got it down.
We were having quite a few. Baron, you were there sitting next to me also. It was Allison's wedding in Muncie.
Yeah. Now I remember. Taco. Yeah. We made the guy nuts.
We were having a good time.
You're the one with the shul? Yes, I'm the one with the shul. So you're not the one who answered. Nope. In the basement.
Yeah. Anyways, fine. So Ma'aser Shvi'u Kupa Malaya Tzamas Beis HaKnesset Tarsim. They brought it to a box of bones to the Beis HaKnesset of Tarsim v'nichu ba'avir, but they left it outside. I mean, they didn't want everybody to become tamei, right? You could just see this going on in Eretz Yisrael, right? A guy's coming with a tumult. They're coming to tumult, so they bring a box of bones and they leave it outside the Beis Medrash, and everybody's giving their opinions right now, right? Oh, is it from one body? Is it from two bodies? Is it from the skull? Is it from everybody's hacking a chinik, right? V'nichnas tudas haroife v'chol haroifim imoy. But then they call the doctor. That's what you do, right? You call a doctor to find out what's going to be.
So they were allowed to go into another shul.
Well, this is outside the shul. They called. That's interesting, because they call. Yeah, that's true. But when they said they kept the bones outside. Okay, so v'nichnas tudus aroifim v'chol aroifim imoy. I guess he was the head guy, together with all the roifim v'amru, and they said, "Ein kan shedra mimeis echad." In this box of bones, this is not a shedra from one mace, right? Memela, it's a combination of a lot of mason. I guess they had like a grab bag or something. So therefore, there's a bunch of mason, right? So therefore, since there wasn't a full spine, so memela, it was not metama. The like a shedra, the mechada. The reason why they said it's not metama is because it didn't have the spine from one. Ha'ika ay shedra al gugalas the mechada. That's mashma, that if it had either the backbone from one mace or a gulgailas or the skull, the mechada, then nazir megalechale, and then a nazir became tamei to it, so you'd have to take a haircut. So shma mina ay shedra al gulgalas. It must be. It says or in the Mishnah. You don't need both. You need either the skull or the spine. So Gemara says, the doctor to this, when he answered that it's not tamei, he's saying like you don't need it, meaning I don't even need to tell you that it's a backbone and a skull from one. You don't even have one, right? So Mamelo, he wasn't getting involved whether the spine becomes tummy by itself or the skull or both. He was just saying you don't have a spine from one, or you don't even have a full skull from one. So Mamela, it's out. But he wasn't getting involved in whether a skull or a spine needs to be together in order to be metam. Fine. So Tashema, Miminyana. Let's learn from the whole minyan, from the counting of the machlokes, right? We said that there were 6 things that Rabbi Kiva and the Chacham had a machlokes about whether it's matam or not. Umahin shisha dvarim. Rabbi Kiva matam Chacham matam. What were the 6 things that Rabbi Kiva said tam and Chacham said tar? Al aver min ameis shabab shnei mason. You have an aver from a mace that came from 2 mason. I don't know exactly how this worked back then, but basically it says if there was 1 aver that came from 2 mason, meaning they must have fused, let's say an arm. They took an arm, and that arm was made out of
Siamese twins.
No, because Siamese twins, I don't know what they did of Siamese twins. No, this was an arm from 2 different people, but the same arm. Right?
He attached Tommy John's arm to somebody else, no?
That's it. They must have done that. Yeah, that must have. Yeah, I don't know. They did that stuff back then. That's some technology.
They used to do these like mausoleums where they would let the everything rot away, and then but bones could get mixed up. So you had the top part of your arm and the second part of your arm. I'm assuming that's what they're talking about. They didn't like sew people on. It wasn't Frankenstein in the time of the Gemara.
How do you know? It sure sounds like
I was just thinking the same thing. I don't think it means they're fused together. You have a total of 1 aver, but it's made out of 2, 3 different parts, whatever.
No, because
between all the parts that you have in front of you, you have 1 aver.
It can't be, because then it's not a full aver. It can't be that. I don't think it can't be. That's not a full aver, because it's not a full aver.
We're only talking about bones. We're only talking bones.
Right now, we're talking bones. Yeah, bones.
Because so the surgery, right? The surgeries where they take in the same person, they could take a part of us from him, let's from his foot, and put it into his arm, or vice versa, whatever it is, a vein or something, even bone. Right. So maybe they did it for 2 people.
Oh, so that's an economy. That's yeah. So maybe that's what I'm saying, that they were doing this back then. That's what you have to say, right? Which we're going to get to. I don't know if we'll get to tomorrow's daf or on Amud Beis. How are you even allowed to take bones from dead people to and use them for surgeries? Whether that's called the Bizayin HaMeis, it said it's not pashut at all. Like cataract surgeries and all these things. Right? We discussed it a little bit yesterday.
Come into the base medrash. Like, why can't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nebuch, so anyways, the brothers that were murdered 2 weeks ago, the adult brothers Nebuch that were murdered, they gave their eyes to 4 different people. Yeah.
Is that so?
Yeah.
I think they gave their lenses. I don't think they gave their
corneas.
I don't know.
Whatever.
I'm not
saying, but
a doctor. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. It was 4 different people. Yeah.
It's interesting that they allowed it, because it's not pashut halachically at all. It could be considered bizayin hameis.
That's I don't think most poskim, to my knowledge, allowed, because it's not really. It's like sitting right outside. It's not really like a.
Well, some say it's less than a kizayis. It's less than a kizayis, but I'm saying it's not pashut. This whole body, when you have to sign on your license, that's why you don't sign it on their license to.
The word N-O. Should write big letters N-O. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways,
how do you do like kidney transplants and stuff like that from?
It's a good question, but the kidney transplant is a little bit more makel, because it's not from. There's an Isser Hana on a mace, right? There's an Isser Hana from a mace. Now, one of the poskim, I forgot who, says that when you take it, is a fascinating thing. When you take it from a mace and you connect it to a live body, it's no longer considered a mace. Meaning, if you take a bone from a dead person and you attach it to a live person, you have now done tchias hamesim on that bone, and it's not considered like you're using a bone of a dead person anymore. That's one of that's one of the svaras. What?
Why is that such a chiddush? Avada, that's the whole point when we want that piece.
I understand, but the bottom line is that you're being nene from a mace. Initially, you're being nene from a mace. Now you're fusing it to a live person. So they're saying that now it became alive. Right? It's very interesting. Either
mace.
What?
The initial contact is from a mace.
Yes.
I mean, if you just put a baby on top of it on Shabbos, you'll be fine. No worries.
Here you go, Simon. We haven't had that
I
in
was
a
still
while.
waiting for that.
Yeah. Anyways, so whatever it
Simon,
is,
in deference to Aaron's law, you put a sourdough challah on it.
Baby, sourdough, whatever.
anyways,
Good
so
sourdough wouldn't be so bad right now. Just saying.
a little bit more sour, but yeah. So al aver. So it says al aver min ameis shaba mishnei mesim. So an aver from a mace that comes from two mason. So Rebbe Kiva said that's still tame, even though it's not a full limb. And the Chachamim said it's not tame because it's not a full limb from one mace. Al aver min achai shaba mishnei bnei adam, and the same thing. You have an aver from min achai that came from two people. Val chatzi kav atzamas shaba mishnei mesim, and a half a kav of bones that came from two different mason. Right? Because remember, we said that it needs to have a half a kav in order to be matama. Val revius dam above mishnayim, and a revius dam that came from two. But it's a good thing Zebbold not on tonight because he'll go back to his kasha. The revius dam from two. Right? Val etzem kisa'ira shenechlek l'shnayim, and now the bone, like the size of a barley. Right? We said that it's the barley. A barley, the size of the bone, the size of a barley can be mitama. Shenechling shnayim. Then it became split into two. So Rebbe Kiva says that they'll still be mitama. The Chachamim say no. And then it says va'ashedra v'algulgoylus, and it says and the spine and the skull. On to my base now. So the Gemara says v'sagdatich oy shedra oy gulgoylus, and if you say that it's either the shedra or the gulgoylus, that's mitama. Ani shiva havian. Then there's 7 machloiksim. Right? Then there's 7 machloiksim between Rebbe Kiva and the Chachamim. The Gemara went through 5, and the last 2 was shedra. So if you say shedra and gulgoylus is together, right? So then that's number 6. But if you say it's or shedra or gulgoylus, then that's number 6 and number 7 that Rebbe Kiva and the Chachamim are having a machloikus about. So it must be that it's shedra together with the gulgoylus. So the Gemara answers. The Gemara says 4 different terutzim that no, it could be shedra oigel goylus, and then we're going to say that there's going to be 4 different ways of saying that one of the other 6 is not part of the count. So the Gemara says kikatani, and then it says simin yachid shehu gilach v'rechad. Right? So kikatani kolech the pligi ale rabbi. Rebbe Kiva, where part of the list is only where there was multiple opinions that disagreed with Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva said that tameh. There were multiple opinions that said that he's tar. Lafuke etzem kisa'ira, the yachid hu the polygalech, but the etzem kisa'ira is a das yachid that argues Rebbe Kiva. So therefore, that's not included, even though it was said in the list. But that's not part of the 6, because that's Rebbe Kiva against another opinion. Fine. The Tanya, what's the machlokes? Etzem kisa'ira shenechlek l'shnayim. If you have a bone that's the size of a barley, and it gets split into 2. Rebbe Kiva matama. Rebbe Kiva says it's tameh. Rebbe Yochanan ben Nuri matama. Rebbe Yochanan ben Nuri says it's tar. So therefore, it's a one-on-one machlokes. That's not part of the 6. The 6 is machlokes between Rebbe Kiva and the Chacham. Fine. Viva Yisema. Teretz number 2. Kikatani Ever min ameis, Ever min achai loikatani. We said Ever min ameis. You're not going to say Ever min achai because that's essentially the same din, right? There's no reason to consider those 2 separate machlokes. The whole point is that if you have an aver from a chai or aver from a mace that's made up of 2 different bodies, then Rebbe Kiva says, "Tami Chachamim say not." Third teretz, Viva Yisem Kikatani, Kol Heichad the Nazir Megaleach al Ahiloi. That's where the Nazir is going to have to take a haircut based on tumas oil. Lafuke etzem kisa'ira deloi. That comes to exclude the etzem kisa'ira when there's a barley, the bone the size of a barley. That is not enough to make a Nazir tumas oil. Meaning, if you have a bone the size of a barley in a house, and the Nazir walks into the house, that is not going to make him tummy, right? Because that only makes tumah based on touching, not on tumas oil. Fine. Viva is same in the last teretz. Kikatani. When did we say the 6 machlokes? Kol heichad the hadabe. That's where Rebbe Kiva changed his mind. Lafuke revius dam deloy hadabe comes to exclude the revius of blood that he did not change his mind. Damalei Rebbe lebar Kafra, because Rebbe told Bar Kafra, like Tishana Revi'as Dam b'Chazara. Do not learn that the Revi'as Dam, meaning the Revi'as Dam that comes from two bodies, Rebbe Kiva held that it's Tameh and the Chum said it's Tar. Rebbe Kiva did not change his mind on that. He changed his mind on all the other dinim, and he changed over to the side of Chachamim and said that they're all Tar, but not the Revi'as Dam that came from two people. Sharei Limudish Rebbe Kiva b'Yadei, because Rebbe Kiva, that he was always, it seemed like he was always teaching this, that a revius of blood from two different bodies is metama. Mikra Messiah. And besides for that, the pasuk backs up Rebbe Kiva. Why? Because it says, "Val kol nafshois mace lo yavai." You should not come to nafshois, plural of mace. So you see that revius of dam, which is the equivalent of a body, so it says it can come from multiple nefashot. Reb Shimon Omer, ad yamav hayim metama. His whole life he was metama. If mishemeis chaza by any day, but maybe if once he died, whether maybe Rebbe Kiva changed his mind, I don't know. Meaning, so this is a little bit of a slight towards Rebbe Kiva, because he's saying that Rebbe Kiva during his lifetime didn't change his mind, but could be after he died, he went to Shemayim, he saw the truth. That's the way I'm understanding it, and maybe he changed his mind. So Tana. So we learned Hushcharushina Mipnei Taniyosov. His teeth got black because he fasted so much, because he said something against Rebbe Kiva. He was a Talmud. So like the Tosfos says, it wasn't derech eretz to talk like his Rebbe like that. So Memela he fasted al tshuva, right? Now, it's interesting because that means that he said this. Did he say this after Rebbe Kiva died? L'chayra, right? So that means that you're not allowed to speak negative about a mace either, even though he's already dead. Right? Isn't that what's mashma from this? Yeah. Anyway,
it's also it's just a negative connotation to a positive statement. He's really standing up for Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva held what he held. He wasn't always around himself.
No, but by him saying that,
the way he said
it when he was dead.
Right, so it's the way he said it. He's saying that he didn't change his mind. My Rebbe always held like this, but instead of saying that, maybe when he died he changed his mind.
Right.
So it's
right.
So
that's perceived as something negative. Yeah. Fine. So then Toshima, the Tanya, B'Shamay Omrim, Roiva Atzamis Mina Atzamim. Right. If you have a roiva, means a revius of bones from multiple bones, or even if you have 2 or 3 bones, that's enough to be matama. So Bishama is saying that as long as you have a revius of bones from a collection of bones, or even from 2 or 3 bones, then you're going to have tumas oil from that. No, it has to be a revius, meaning a quarter of 25% from the body. It has to have 25% of the bones from the body in order to make tumas oil, right? But meroiva binyan or meroiva min, it has to be majority of what? Either roiv of the binyan, meaning the majority of the skeleton, or roiva minyan, or the majority of the amount of limbs that are in the body. So again, so Beishamai is being machmer. Beishamai is saying in order to have enough bones to make something tumas oil, right, is you just need to have a 25% of a mixture of bones, right? I mean, 25% not of bones, 20 of like a quarter of a kav, like a revius, or from 2 or 3 bones. But Hillel says no. It's in order to make the tumah, you have to have a quarter of a kav, meaning a revius, from either from the skeleton or from the majority of the bones, right? So I'm able to say that they're saying the same thing. What does that mean? When he says from 2 or 3 bones, what it means is from 2 shayks, 1 yerech. Now there's going to be a lot of, this is the next contemporary machlokes. Gershon's licking his chops on this one, right? Shnei shukayim v'yerech echad. It's 2 shin bones and 1 yerech and 1 thigh bone. Meaning, mishnei yerkayim, or 2 thigh bones v'shaik echad and 1 shaik. Oil v'roiv goiva shal adam megaiva, because most of a person's height is based on his shins together with his thighs. So that's the bones that Beis Shammai is talking about. It has to come from a majority from the body, or Roiv Minyan and Roiv Binyan, because you have a majority of the bones in the hands and in the feet. Right? There are so many tiny little bones in the hands and the feet that you could have a majority just based on the hands and the feet. So what he's saying is that they basically could be saying the same thing. Fine. Now, okay, let's just finish the Gemara and then we'll go back. So Shammai says, now this is not Beis Shammai. Not so common that you have this. You have Machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, and then you have Shammai himself had his own opinion, and that's what the Gemara's proof is going to be. Shammai Yomer, afilu etzem min hashedra min hagulgailos, even if it's just a bone from the backbone or from the. You see that Shammai holds, he says, Shedra Oymen al Galgailis. Right? So that means it's one or the other. You don't need to have both, which answers our Shaila. Our Shaila was, do you need both, or is it one or the other? So the answer, Shammai de Machmer. You can't bring any rayas from Shammai. He was a big Machmer, so you can't bring rayas from him. So the Gemara says, Lifshait Mina, but we still could say Pshat from it. Time of the Beis Shammai de Machmer. The reason is Beis Shammai's Machmer, Horabanon. Right? Now they got to take out the base here. It doesn't make sense that it's Beis Shammai because we're talking about Shammai, right? So time of the Shammai, the Machmer. The reason why we're not bringing a raya from Shammai is because he's Machmer Horabanon Adi Ikashedra V'Gulgailos. It's Mashma that the Rabbanon hold until you have the backbone together with the skull. So Gemara says, "Loi, no, Adkan Loi Pligi Rabbanon led the Shammai." The Chum don't disagree with Shammai. Ela be'etzem echad asim nashedra ben hagulgailos. He's talking about one bone that comes from the shedra from hagulgailos. Aval heichad de'isa be'enei, but where the skull and the spine are right here in front of us, afilu chadaman, then maybe you only need one. Meaning they're saying maybe they disagree with Shammai. That's only when you have one bone. So you have to figure out, is it coming from the shedra? Is it coming from the skull? So maybe you need both. Aval, where you have both of them in front of you, then even if you have a whole spine or you have a whole skull, then maybe that's enough to be metama. So again, this whole sugya is talking about what are the amounts to make somebody tama. We'll continue again tomorrow. Now, just going back, the shaik and the yerech. So the yerech is the thigh. The question is, what is the shaik? Right? So from here it's mashma. The shaik is the shin. Right? Now there's a big issue. Does a woman have to cover her legs from the knees on down? Is that called shaik? What is the translation of shaik? Is shaik the thigh, or is shaik from the knee on down? Right? So the Mishnah Brura paskins that the shaik is the thigh, and therefore he says that a woman does not have to keep her legs covered from the knee on down. Chazon Ish leans towards not like that, but this Gemara is a clear raya against the Mishnah Brura, because this Gemara clearly is saying that the shaik is from the knee on down. It is not from the knee up, like the way the Mishnah Brura says it. Right? So that's a major, and that's what they bring as a raya. This Gemara, they bring as a raya that a woman would have to cover, because it says shaik be'isha erva. Forgot that part. Sorry. It says shaik be'isha erva. Right? So shaik be'isha is erva. So, well, tefach be'isha is erva too, but a shaik.
No, it's tefach be'shaik. I think it's the lashon in Shabbos, right? I think it's Shabbos.
Exactly. But whatever it is, the shaik part is an erva. So if you learn that the shaik is from the knee on down, which is what the yeshiva shechasida shevel learns, which is why the women always keep their their legs covered from the knee down, right? But the more modern world goes with the Mishnah Brura, that he says that the shaik means the thigh. That has to be covered, but under the knee is not. But this Gemara is clearly saying that the shaik is the how do you call it? The
thigh.
Not the thigh. No, our Gemara is saying the shaik is. This Gemara is clearly saying that the shaik. Yerech is the thigh. The shaik is the shin. The shin. But anyways, okay, that's the other contemporary issue. I hope this was. Understandable. What?
This machlokas is shocking.
That's very good.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyways, all right. So everybody should have themselves a fine night. And sorry for the delay.
So Yaakov.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about this through these few Gemaras here. This business of surgeries are here and surgeries are here. Maybe they never had such surgeries back in those days, but the Gemara is telling us these will be eventually. They will be, and it could be very confusing. It's like, I know we don't have the technology today, but obviously it's something that we could have the technology. I don't think they had the hospitals and MRIs, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, but maybe it's telling us that this is something that's shaykh. Like a person would have two heads, or all these different transplants and stuff that we do all regularly today. 100 years ago, they also thought that was not possible in the medical world. But here in the Gemara is maybe it's 100% shaykh. We just don't have the technology there. That's an interesting shkafa question how to look at the Gemara. Maybe it was no, just sometimes the Gemara says something that's like totally whacked out, and we're just not holding by that, Like to hear
I just saw that in Eretz Yisrael they found the back of a person's skull that was cut out. They say like a little square. They say that they believe that was the first like intracranial surgery that they had. This was a long time ago.
The rest of that guy is still walking around.
Called trephination. They did it also in Vikings and others. They used to say you need that surgery like you need a hole in the head.
Does that have to be Ravua?
I thought that was a lobotomy.
No, that's up here.
I saw patients with lobotomies. It's very sad.
What?
I saw a patient with lobotomy. It was very sad.
Terrible.
There was a guy who used to come into the yeshiva when we were still on Central Avenue from the Hebrew Living Center over there. And he was a big chacham when he was young. He just must have been wild, whatever it is. And they did a job on him. He still came to daven, but he was, he was just, he was chasser. It's really, it's sad. Some people it would kill them. Some people it wouldn't have much effect. It's how whatever they would cut up in their mush up there was just they took two holes and.
The doctor, listen. For every lobotomy, there's other surgeries that a lot of people died from that led to breakthroughs. I'm saying heart surgery was looked at as also a terrible thing in the beginning.
Lobotomy, though, you disconnected the frontal lobes.
No, I know. I'm just saying when originally they were doing heart transplants, they were calling those doctors murderers
because they were.
I understand that, but you know what? Without them, we wouldn't have heart transplants nowadays.
Let's not get into that.
I don't remember them ever calling Dr. Bakley, who did the first heart transplant, calling him a murderer.
Yeah, they did. There's a lot of people that held what they did back then was absolute murder.
Right. And that's how they came up
with similar to the COVID vaccine.
That's how they came. They came up with brain death because they were afraid of criminal charges. In Maimonides, the nurses refused to cooperate with the heart transplant, which was basically killing the donor at that time. In South Africa, I think it was the Bakey. They were afraid, could they take the heart out of a black man for a white man? Maybe it wouldn't match. So those were the interesting days. But
doctor, they did accuse these people. A lot of people were anti it.
But they came up with this term brain death, kind of a way to prevent getting criminal charges. Brain death, of course, is not realistic because the brain is not completely dead, unlike what they tell of Moshe. But that's for another day. So
I understand, but my point is that there are things that turned out bad, but that's how you revolutionize medicine.
Had a lobotomy, but if your loved one had a lobotomy, it was not such a good thing. The person who did them got the Nobel Prize for it, by the way. I can't remember his name. Got the Nobel Prize for that. They thought at the time was a brilliant idea. The Kennedy, all the Kennedy research that went into disabled children and so on, because they gave one of their kids a lobotomy and the kid was like really messed up. So out of guilt, the Kennedys gave a lot of money. You go to the Kennedy Center at Einstein and all sorts of other, I think at Johns Hopkins. It all came out of that bungled lobotomy research. But that's for another time. Have a fine night.
All right. Good one. Have a good one.
Infinite.
Yeah, go ahead. Drop those bombs and leave. No problem.